Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how are you doing today?
Tony, I'm wonderful. We got to talk to my favorite position group, once again proving it's the offensive linemen, and there is never a bad interview session with the offensive linemen. I don't know what it is, but offensive linemen are just always fantastic interviews.
They are, and it's been that way for maybe forever. But these guys are good, and we didn't even talk to Harry Miller, who's also really kind of open. And I think one of the things I like about Greg Studrawa, because we talked to Greg Studrawa, we talked to Thayer Munford, Nick Petit-Frere, Luke Wypler. Although we should probably Wypler. Tom, what is the full stance on the show? Because on OSU's call, Mike Bassford called him Wypler.
Mm-hmm.
I've been Wypler.
I have always said Wypler. Mike Bassford said Wypler. I assume he knows. Luke didn't correct him, so I assume I never assume I'm wrong, and I assume I must be wrong. So I thought after that, I've got to go back and check the media guide and see if there's a pronunciation guide in there.
Yeah,
and then I didn't do it. So I'm just going to default to Mike, and if I say Wypler and it's wrong, well, that's Mike's problem, not mine.
Luke, and also Paris Johnson, which he's always good to talk to as well. So that's what we did on Wednesday, and then on Friday we will talk to the defensive line with Larry Johnson, and I'm sure we'll learn a bunch more there as well. I always like, and we'll get into the offensive line stuff, but I always like talking to Greg Studrawa because he tells you a lot. Like, he may give you more information than any other coach on the staff, because he's very happy about his room, and he tells you all about it. But we'll first, Tom, let's get to the news of the week, which was two Ohio State Buckeye freshmen lost their black stripes this week. They practiced on Tuesday. Following practice, you had Marvin Harrison Jr., freshman wide receiver, and Jack Sawyer, the freshman defensive end. I think Jack Sawyer was probably the betting favorite among the freshmen to lose his black stripes, so that was no surprise. If you're a member of BuckeyeScoop.com, Marvin Harrison losing his black stripe, I don't think is a huge surprise if you've been on the Ask the Insiders board. But I think, recruiting-wise, Harrison had kind of fallen behind. He'd sort of dropped down the rankings. He was still a top 100 guy, I think. He was, because that's all Brian Hartline signs, other than that, wannabe receiver Chris Olave that they got out of California. But he had kind of been, people are more excited about Emeka Egbuka and things like that. And so he shows up and certainly looks the part, just physically. And then you go out and you watch him a little bit. You got to see him. You had video of a couple of touchdown catches for him, and just continues to, I don't know what he's listed at, maybe 6'3", 205 or something like that. But I mean, he looks legit, whatever it is. I mean, he looks like a prototypical X receiver. And so maybe a lot of people expected Egbuka to be the first receiver, but were you all that surprised that it was Marvin Harrison Jr.?
I was not all that surprised, because as you said, there have been just very consistent practice reports coming out, and it's not just one of our guys who, might be talking to the same person. It's a bunch of our folks on staff who are talking to all sorts of different people. And when you start very consistently hearing a name, it's like, okay, that's someone that's impressing everyone. And that is the camp that Marvin Harrison Jr. has been in this spring. And it's not surprising. I mean, you have, with guys like Teron Vincent, Marvin Harrison Jr., where they are the sons of former NFL players. It's like, this is kind of the equivalent of being the son of a coach kind of thing, where it's like the son of the basketball coach is always like this really, really refined technique, really, understands the work ethic, understands what goes into playing at the highest level, because he's living with someone who has, he's lived the first 18 years of his life with someone who has done that. Marvin Harrison Sr. is literally an NFL Hall of Famer. So you cannot get much, to a much higher level of the sport than he did. And, he knows what it takes to get there. And for Marvin Harrison Jr. to have gotten at this level, that's what it takes. And you hear the work ethic. There's another Ohio State wide receiver in the past who was the son of an NFL Hall of Famer who did not necessarily follow through on the work ethic. And you heard that too back then. So when you hear the positive work ethic stuff about Marvin Harrison Jr. and, just how refined he is in all of his game. Yeah. I mean, I think I know that I said Jack Sawyer was probably the first one to lose his stripe, but I think I might have literally said Jack Sawyer or Marvin Harrison Jr. So Yeah, those were not really a surprise at all.
Don't worry, you'll get a chance to predict the next black stripe removal. So just think about it. There's, like what, 13 guys in terms of the freshmen. Although I should have thrown some wrinkles in there because a lot of times it's the walk-ons, the veteran, the second year walk-ons who get the black stripe removals before some of the freshmen. But Jack Sawyer, the other guy, yeah, go ahead.
I'm just going to interrupt you right now because I pulled up. I thought I should pull up the media guide from 2020 and find the official pronunciation for Luke Wypler / Wypler. How could I have not known this? The secret is he was not in the pronunciation guide last year. So maybe this is like a real interpretive thing. Like, you pronounce it how you feel it should be pronounced. So then, I guess I'm still defaulting to Mike Bassford, and Wypler, but it's not my fault. I was wrong. I think that's my main takeaway here. This is not on me.
Bassford is a Jersey guy. He should know, right?
He should know. He should. Yeah, Bassford. Well, yes. I don't know if he's from Jersey.
But once you go to Rutgers, you've got a lot of Jersey on you.
You've got that. Yeah.
Like you're not getting that off.
It's the exact opposite of Vegas.
You're going to be taking that with you wherever you go. So Jack Sawyer, the other guy, no surprise. I think he continues to secure a spot in that 5-man rotation. We've talked about that where he's just going to move right in. And maybe that was Javante Jean-Baptiste last year where he is that 5th guy. I think JJB moves into that 4-man and then Jack Sawyer is there. I think he's going to play quite a bit, and it'll be very similar to what they would do with Chase Young and Jonathan Cooper, where Larry Johnson, like I said, we'll talk to him on Friday, doesn't want to put them in situations where they'll not succeed. So he'll pick and choose where he puts Jack Sawyer into the game. I'm sure he'll play late, but I also think he's going to play early as well because, why not? He's a pretty talented guy, getting stronger. When you look at he's listed at 6'4", 240, which is pretty small for a defensive end at this point. But I think they're seeing all kinds of explosion, and he's certainly strong enough to do whatever they need right now. So he's only going to get bigger, better, faster, of course. But do you see him in the rotation?
I can't imagine him not being in the rotation. I mean, you go through the years, and the guys who are, the 5-star defensive end types, Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, Chase Young, Zach Harrison. There's like a very consistent baseline for like about what their freshman year looks like. And Joey Bosa was a little higher, but the rotation was probably not as deep back when Joey Bosa was there. But Nick Bosa, Chase Young, Zach Harrison, it's all like, yeah, they're playing enough, and they're in that 3.5 sacks range. Like, that's exactly what I would project for Jack Sawyer this year. He's good enough to play. Obviously, respected, liked in that room. If if he's got that black stripe off this early, it matches everything we've heard about him, just in terms of talent, in terms of work ethic. Our guys who are not super hyperbolic, Bill Green and Mark Givler and our recruiting crew who they are not just gassing up everyone for no reason. I have heard the next Bosa out of several of their mouths a whole bunch of times where, this is very clearly what the expectation is for Jack Sawyer. So I would think that's kind of, he's not going to break Chase Young's sack record this year. Sorry, but if he's on the field enough, if he's in the rotation as a true freshman, gets that 3.5 sacks, like, okay, you're pretty much on track for a pretty solid career.
It's not easy to lose your black stripe as a true freshman in spring. Did you go back and do the research that I didn't do about who all of the true freshmen were that have done this, Tom?
I did not. I wrote about this a couple of years ago about the first guys to lose their stripes, and generally it's happening in the fall. It's the guys who lose their stripes super quickly are transfers. When Jonah Jackson shows up, when Trey Sermon shows up, those guys will lose their stripe very quickly. Other than that, J.K. Dobbins came in the spring, was the first true freshman in his class to lose his stripe, but lost it in August. Like, that is, it's very, very uncommon for guys to lose it in the spring. Usually it's, a lot of them are before the season, but in the fall. So yeah, so in this case, to not just lose it in the spring, but lose it like halfway through the spring. That's, that is one of those, you never want to put too much emphasis on something like that. But when it's that early and it's two guys and it sort of confirms what you're hearing everywhere else about them, that's like, okay, that I think really tells me something.
I seem to recall Austin Mack doing it, losing it, and I just did a Google. Yes, he lost his March 31st in 2016 in the spring. Tommy Togiai being the other off the top of my head that did it as I type this into Google, which is tremendous podcasting.
Your vamping is unmatched as always. And Austin Mack, I do remember losing it very early. I didn't remember that was the spring, but yeah, that was he was someone who I think people had like unrealistic expectations for based on that. Like, you still, there's still work to do. And I think there are probably people who view him as someone who didn't necessarily live up to the like all-American kind of expectations, but he had a really good career. He's played in the NFL last year for the Giants. I mean, that's, if you view him as as something of a disappointment, that's probably a little bit more of a reflection on you maybe having some unrealistic expectations than on his career in and of itself. Yeah.
So I think Austin Mack was a 3-year starter, sharing time with Benjamin Victor. And so, we know what Tommy Togiai did. So it's certainly a good sign. But what I want to do now, Tom, we're going to have you predict the next freshman, but I'm not just going to let you pull one out of your hat. I have actually created a bracket. And yes, Tom, I told Tom, I've got this bracket. He's like, well, bracket, it's not really it's like a visual medium. Don't worry. I'll explain it. And the thing is, there's 13 guys. So it's hard to do a bracket of 13 entities, So I've got some buys, some double buys in there. But what I did seed them properly. So I've got like the top rated guy going against the bottom rated guy, which, Tom, is Emeka Egbuka against Jesse Mirko. Which of those two are you choosing?
Why did you make the Aussie the lowest seeded man, mate?
That's the recruiting rankings did. I didn't.
Okay. All right. Okay. So we just went strictly recruiting rankings.
Yes.
Okay. That's an interesting one because Egbuka, I think, is another one of those guys you're hearing good things about. But Mirko comes in and he's a little older. He's not, he's not the high school kid. He's a little older, a little more mature. He's going to be in a position where he's going to be making, he's going to be starting this year, almost certainly. So I think this is much closer than you would think based on the fact that, this is number 1 versus number 13. I'm going to go chalk here, but I don't feel super confident in it. So I will go with Emeka Egbuka, but I think this is honestly pretty much a coin flip.
Well, and Jesse Mirko is almost as much as close to a transfer as you can get from a true freshman.
Exactly. Plus he's Australian, which obviously is, that's like adding a bunch of quad 1 wins to your resume. So really, exactly. I think he's dramatically underseeded here.
Well, hey, that's the recruiting services.
Don't blame me, the person who literally made the bracket, says Tony.
I didn't come up with the net ranking. I just used it. So the next one, Tom, Reed Carrico versus Jansen Dunn. Reed Carrico, the linebacker, Jansen Dunn, the free safety. Dunn, the third free safety right now. Carrico, kind of like, he is the typical guy who does everything that loses a black stripe. He's a messy,
Yeah. He sort of fits that mold. I'm going to go with Carrico there. He very much fits the mold of the guy who is doing all of the stuff that, that lets you lose your stripe.
That's a very interesting second round matchup. Egbuka against Reed Carrico.
That is. And yeah, I might just based on history like that.
Oh, we'll get there. Like, don't.
Okay. All right.
I mean, this is a Tuesday, Thursday, type of thing,
Okay.
We'll get there. This next one, Kyle McCord versus Zen Michalski.
I'm going to take Kyle McCord there, I think, pretty easily. Offensive line, I think, is one of those spots where it's so hard to establish yourself. You have so much work to do to kind of get up to that college level. That feels like an area where I can't remember that many offensive linemen losing their stripes early. It was like Harry Miller, I think, lost his pretty early. And other than that, it's like, yeah, Jonah Jackson did, Paris Johnson did. But those are guys who were like playing that first year. I don't think Zen Mahalski's there, so I'm going to go with Kyle McCord.
Yeah, and he's still got ways to go to become an offensive lineman, and he's still growing into that. The final matchup of the first round, Travion Henderson versus Sam Hart, tight end.
Travion Henderson. And that was like, I was about ready to say Travion Henderson just after you said Travion Henderson, because I think Travion Henderson, I don't want to spoil anything. I think Travion Henderson has a chance to go a long way in this tournament. But
he's a 2 seed, and we know 2 seeds you got to be careful with those 2 seeds.
Well, he didn't. Yes, he did not get. I'm not even going to do it. Not
Travion Henderson versus Oral Roberts.
Yeah, see, that was what I was going to do, and I thought, no, I don't want to do that to the audience. But Tony just plowed right ahead.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I totally did. All right. So let's go to the second round. Emeka Egbuka versus Reed Carrico. Who you got, Tom? Because again, Reed Carrico is the type of guy who does this, but Egbuka is just a remarkable athlete.
And that's it. And I mean, there are not like bad seeds in this tournament. Like, did we do Denzel Burke yet, or did you skip him?
He has a bye with Evan
okay.
Pryor.
Oh, okay.
And there's a couple other buys.
I was going to say, I feel like we missed a couple people.
No,
okay,
we'll get to them. Like Ben Chrisman has a double bye, triple bye, like, just because he's the middle guy of the class, so there's nobody to match him up with. So
normally they give the higher seats the buys. So I can explain how tournaments work later.
No, I already had the spreadsheet done. It was too late.
All right. So what's my matchup?
Egbuka against Carrico.
I'm gonna go Carrico, and I'm purely going. This is me changing my mind mid-sentence.
Oh,
I think I'll go Egbuka, because I think there's a better chance Egbuka gets on the field on offense this year than Carrico does on defense. But I could see either of them being kind of like special teams assassins this year. So again, this is a pretty close one. I'll go with Egbuka for now.
What do you think? What do you make of the Egbuka running in the slot that we've seen so far? I think it makes sense with you've got Marvin Harrison at the X, you've got Jaden Ballard the Z, and then you've got Egbuka running in the slot. To me, that just makes the most sense right now.
I think when we looked at that class last fall, if you had said, how are these three going to line up? The guy who reminds everyone of Devin Smith is probably going to be the Z, the guy who's tall and, like he's going to be the X, and the shifty, explosive guy, quick. Yeah, that's going to be the H. Like, yep, that's exactly how I would have lined them up. So good job, Brian Hartline.
All right, so here comes these two guys had a bye. Evan Pryor versus Denzel Burke. We've heard a lot of good things about Denzel Burke. We know Evan Pryor is still getting strong enough to be that guy, but can make some plays. Where are you, Tom?
I'm going with Denzel Burke there. I think Denzel Burke is one of those people that I think you're hearing enough about that he is very much in the running to be the next guy who loses his stripe potentially. I don't know if he's going to be the single next guy, but he's definitely in the running. So yeah, I'll take him there.
All right, here's one for you. Jaden Ballard versus Tyleek Williams, the big nose tackle, and the receiver. Who you got?
Oh, interesting. Yeah,
it's not a tug of war.
It is not a tug of war, which is true.
It's not a 40.
It is not a 40. Tyleek Williams, I would normally default to the defensive lineman a lot like the offensive lineman, maybe has a lot of time to, needs a little bit more time to develop. We're hearing pretty good things about Tyleek Williams right now. I don't know that either of these guys are going to be the next one to lose it, but I would say Tyleek Williams is probably the guy I would take there.
Just notice I advanced Ben Chrisman all the way to the Final Four. That's fine. So you went Tyleek Williams. Wow.
I went Tyleek Williams. That's probably a little bit of an upset.
I don't know that it is. It's a tough one.
He's just someone who, again, those early practice reports, you're hearing and really encouraging things about not just his performance, but also his makeup and work ethic. And, that goes a long way in my mind to getting that black stripe off. Now,
are you ready for the 2-3 matchup?
Probably not. Go ahead.
Kyle McCord versus Travion Henderson.
And yeah, this is a, you have botched this bracket terribly, because this is absolutely a Final Four matchup, and somehow it's like this is in the like Rutgers Minnesota spot.
No,
in the
it's
Big Ten.
so true. It's very true. Yes, this is like Ohio State's seeding in what 2011 or whatever, when the four best teams were in the same quadrant. So yes, no, I agree. But you signed up for this. You knew this was happening 15 minutes ago.
I'm sorry. I thought this was going to be done like an actual tournament and not just, See, these are two guys who I literally could be maybe the next guy, and it wouldn't completely shock me. I'm gonna go with Travion Henderson here, but let me tell you, I think we did a show after Monday, and I'm sure I have gassed up Kyle McCord quite a bit already, but I was very, very, very impressed with Kyle McCord on Monday. Very impressed. And, it would not, these are two guys who could both lose them by the end of spring, and it wouldn't surprise me. So I'll go with Travion Henderson there, but this is Tony's fault that I have to make that. Kyle McCord, if you're listening, you have to take that up with Tony and his terrible bracketing, and it's not on me. Sorry.
Well, I mean, they would eventually match up anyway. That's why you can't complain about the seedings. You got to beat good teams to get to the finals. So don't, unless you're Ben Christman.
Here's what I'm gonna say. I'm gonna pick them to tie. They're gonna pick exactly. They're gonna lose their stripes. They're gonna lose their stripes on the exact same time. So I don't know if we're doing a tiebreaker for whose video gets tweeted out 12 seconds earlier.
Yes, that is the tiebreaker.
Okay, then I think they'll go Henderson and then McCord, just because they'll do it alphabetically. So there you go.
Yeah, that is alphabetically. Marvin Harrison and Jack Sawyer. Marvin Harrison went first.
There you go. Letters. How do they work?
So you went Henderson. All right. So let's go back up to the top of the bracket. Emeka Egbuka against Denzel Burke. The winner will face Ben Christman in the Final Four.
This is another interesting one. Here's the problem. They're recruiting like all like good kids with good makeup and
so
impressive athletic ability. It's like, I keep going, someone has to lose this. I'll go with Denzel Burke here. I think I don't know if he's a dark horse, but he's someone who, again, like, you're hearing so many positive things about him, and that's a position where there's such a need there that he has an opportunity to really get on the field pretty early. And if you're in that running for a starting job, those are the guys who are losing their stripes. If they're doing all the other stuff right, if you're in the running for a starting job, you're not starting if you still have a black stripe on. So I'll go with Denzel Burke there. Yeah,
and the fact that he started out injured and has continued to play through, and when you hear coaches throw words like innate and he's got great feet and he's natural and just he's picking up such crazy steam right now, I could see him definitely being the first guy. Let's go back to the bottom of the bracket, see who goes into the Final Four, or into the Final Four. Tyleik Williams against Travion Henderson, Tom. I know where you're leaning, so tell me.
I'm leaning towards Travion Henderson. I think I'm Travion Henderson is right at the top of the list for me in terms of who might be next. So I'll take Travion Henderson.
All right, then we go back to the other side of the Final Four. Denzel Burke versus Ben Christman for a shot in the finals.
Ben Christman. I think here's what I'm thinking. Ben Christman's a little rusty after the inexplicable triple bye, so I think Denzel Burke catches him early.
Okay,
and again, offensive line, like, unless you are like in that starting mix, or at least in the rotation, the mix for to be in the rotation, like Paris Johnson was last year, for example, Harry Miller a couple of years ago, in that backup role. We're not hearing that about Ben Christman, which is fine. Like, you don't expect a offensive lineman to do that. So, good for Ben Christman for earning that triple bye somehow. But,
West Coast Conference.
West Coast. There you go. Yes. Ben Christman with his big wins over the University of San Francisco.
Pacific.
There you go. Pacific. Yeah, exactly. Loyola Marymount. Yeah. Big time. So yeah. I'll go with Denzel Burke there.
Okay. And again, thinking about tournaments, it's all about matchups. So you can say, oh, Ben Christman shouldn't have been given this, or why do I have to pick between Kyle McCord and Travion Henderson? It's all about matchups. I mean, you don't know how you're going to be seated. There's no rhyme or reason to it.
Even when you know how tournaments work, you don't have any idea how this one's going to work. So
exactly. So now we're in the finals. Denzel Burke versus Travion Henderson to see who the third true freshman to lose their black stripe will be. Drum roll, please, Tom. But also do it in Australian.
Crikey, mate, this is a tough one. I think I'm going to go with Denzel Burke
Oh, wow.
just because I think he has a clearer path to the field. Although I would not surprise me if both of them were at least in the rotation for starting time very early this fall. I feel like my accent really trailed off there. I think I have about a two sentence max there.
Mhm.
We're going to have to work on that. I have to work on my stamina, I think, a little better.
Yeah, you get fatigued.
I don't know what that was towards the end, but I don't think it was very good Australian.
So is this another case of you just going alphabetical?
I think Denzel Burke these are two guys who I think are, if you're going to put those, those positional groups out there, guys who have the opportunity to be top three guys in those positional groups by the time the fall starts, which means those are two guys who have the opportunity to be, if you're playing, you've lost your stripe. Like if they're looking at you as a true freshman as being in the mix already, those are guys who I think could lose their stripes. I think there's any of 3 or 4 guys who could lose their stripes before the end of spring. Those are 2 of them. But yeah, I think this is I'm just basically looking right now as a tiebreaker at who has an easier path to the field. And I think there's so much competition in that running back room that it may take a little while longer to kind of earn a higher percentage of reps. And there's, the Ohio State defense, the cornerback room for Ohio State is not as deep as the running back room. That's my hot take for the day.
So you are going alphabetical. That's so that's so annoying. It's like when people, the people who win the March Madness brackets just pick based on, I like this red color, I like this purple color. It's like you don't even bring any logic or knowledge into it. It's really disappointing, especially after I spent so much time putting this bracket together.
Mm. Well, Denzel Burke does have the prettiest costumes, so therefore.
All right, Tom, let's move to the offensive line since we spent an unbelievable 25 minutes on that.
Some of our worst work yet.
No, I think people fast forwarded through just fine. One of the most interesting things to me, Greg Studrawa says that he's got 11 guys going through their first spring. And you think about the 2019 signees like Harry Miller, who came in the summer. They didn't get a spring last year. And now he's not getting a spring this year, but like there's the guys who came in, even juniors now are finally experiencing their first spring because they didn't have one last year and maybe they enrolled after the spring, their freshman year. So this is an opportunity for so many different guys to just grow and get reps. And so many guys have not gotten those reps in practice. And it was just interesting to hear him talk about so many different guys. And it's like, we've talked about how deep the room is, but then he's just like names like 8 or 9 guys just on the interior, another 5 or 6 it seems like can play tackle, or 4 or 5. And I've never seen an Ohio State offensive line room this deep or this talented, really, because the depth can play.
Right. And you go back to last year and they took in 6 offensive linemen in last year's class. And there were a lot of people who looked at that and went, it's Paris Johnson and a bunch of projects, and you'll see what you get 2-3 years from now. And then you look and it's like, well, okay, it is Paris Johnson, but DeJuan Jones was 2 years ago, but last year, but Josh Fryer is someone who is all of a sudden like very seriously in the mix for playing time, like that early. That is way earlier than I think anyone would have expected for him. You've got, and then the year before that has been, you go back 3 years. The year they brought in Enoch Vamahi very late, there was like critical depth problems on that offensive line. And then they've restocked the room pretty well. And you're not going to have 100% hit rate on these guys. Like that is a very, very difficult position to evaluate. So yet, that's a real challenge to, hit on a high enough percentage to be able to have that depth. Because I had Kirk Barton on the Morning Scoop this week to talk about this. You very consistently want 14, 15 guys in that room to make sure you have enough depth, because you're not going to hit on all of them. There are just guys who won't develop physically. There's guys who won't be able to do it, in terms of quickness. There's guys who won't be able to hold the weight well. There's a million different ways an offensive line recruitment and development can go badly. So you need to hit on a high enough percentage. And it feels like they have hit on a very high percentage of the guys they've brought in, that they have even the guys who you probably last year at this time would have said maybe weren't hits, Matt Jones, Max Ray, when they needed them, they stepped up. They were playing, Wyatt Davis goes down, Matt Jones is there, Paris Johnson's there, DeJuan Jones is there. I mean, they have just a really, really good track record of developing these guys at this point. And, when you lost 3 offensive linemen against Michigan State, it was just, they went out and they won that game by 40 points. Like it was like, you would have had no idea looking that they lost 3 offensive linemen, and to lose 3 offensive linemen, a day or 2 before the game, like that was to be able to just kind of like, oh, well, next man up, throw in that next level of guys. That's an incredible luxury to have. So yeah, this is without a question the deepest Ohio State offensive line I can remember, because the top line is really good, but it feels like you could put guys 6 through 10 in an offensive line, and they would be probably an above average at least offensive line in the Big Ten.
Yeah, you lose Josh Myers and Wyatt Davis, and you're like, I mean, that's just the cost of doing business. But there are other guys there that people are excited about as well, and they're deep and they're versatile, which turns 14 guys basically into 20. And you got Paris Johnson who can play 4 different positions, and I'm not convinced he couldn't play center if he wanted to. And he's right now playing. Oh, Tom, he's playing at right guard, and I want to address this. Would you care to apologize, or not apologize, just acknowledge how correct I was about my projection of Paris Johnson being at right guard when I threw out my starting 22 on the Ask the Insiders board this weekend, and I had Harry Miller at left guard, Matt Jones at center, and Paris Johnson at right guard, and you were just, oh no, clutching your pearls about how wrong I was, and now we continue to see Paris Johnson at right guard, talking about building this bond with Nick Petit-Frere. Tom, would you care to acknowledge my call on that one?
You did take that out of literally watching video of the where he was. It wasn't exactly you pulled that out of thin air, but the
internet is in thin air.
Yeah, my objection to that was more that if you're going to play on the left side of the line as a left tackle next year, does it make sense to play on the left side of the line? So you're doing everything with the same hand. You get guard and tackle are different responsibilities, and you need some different skill sets and all that kind of stuff. Does it make sense though, if you're going to be the left tackle next year, to be the left guard this year? I mean, I had Kirk Barton on the Morning Scoop earlier this week to talk about that, and he didn't say I was an idiot, so that's good. That's I'm declaring victory there. So, but yeah, no, that is where he is. I'm still a little surprised at that, but I mean, this is something where they are very big on the find the 5 best and then sort them out from there, and it sure seems like Paris Johnson is going to be one of the 5 best, and wherever that ends up being, that's he'll be out there somewhere. But yes, correct. You are correct right now. As they get ready to play their first game of the season here on April 8th or 7th, yes, Paris Johnson is at right guard. Correct.
All right, that'll do it, Sean. I have nothing left to talk about today. We can end the show right there if you want. But well, and then I did ask Paris about that. Like, is it easier or is it difficult to go from right side to left side? And he basically said guard is very similar each side. It's because your balance is similar both ways, as opposed to being out at tackle where it's very different. So maybe it's not. Maybe the bigger issue is going from guard to tackle, and of course he'll have all off season to get that balance right and the footwork right to be a left tackle next year. And I don't think anybody is concerned at all. He's certainly not. He was already talking about. Well, he's already being asked questions about the NFL draft, and it's like, well, he's heading into his sophomore year, but he's saying like this is just going to show teams that I'm versatile and it'll add value. And he's like all these other guys. They're really cerebral. And they take all of this in, and just another impressive guy, as you said. But yes, really, really good to see that I was right about that. And unless if something changes, then we don't need to talk about it. But Tom, Harry Miller, so much talk about, is he going to lose his job to Matt Jones? And I asked Greg Studrawa, is he here's the problem with the question I asked Greg Studrawa. I said, is he one of your best 5 And will he be in the mix at center when he returns? And Stud, the first couple of words he said are absolutely, absolutely. And then it's like, well, which question are you answering absolutely to? But then he went on to say, yeah, I totally expect him to be one of the top 5. And so I think that pretty much solidifies the top 5, which is, Munford, Nick T-Frere, Paris Johnson at right guard, and then some semblance, as we've been saying for weeks now, of Harry Miller and Matt Jones. Are you feeling any differently about that right now?
No, the thing that I think would be the biggest question there is who's the center and who's the left guard, and that's something they may sort out sometime later this summer or even getting into fall camp. But I do think that unless someone gets hurt, that's almost certainly going to be your starting 5, and with those 5 guys, you have to feel real good because those are all veteran guys at this point. I mean, Paris Johnson, like, he's not a veteran. I mean, he played last year, but he is very much like what Harry Miller was last year, where it's like the way people talk about him, the body of work he had before he got to Ohio State. You feel like you know what you have with him more so than you do with most guys who are first-time starters. So, it probably won't be perfect this year, but that offensive line across the deck, like, I don't know how many schools in the country are going to have a better offensive line than those 5 for Ohio State this fall.
Yeah, and there are backups behind them that can play as well. And it was interesting to hear Studrawa talk about Luke Wypler, about how he was the day Wypler. Well, we don't know. I mean, but we are going to go with what Mike Basser said, Luke Wypler, about how the day after the Alabama game, Wypler was back at the football facilities shooting video and wanting his coach, wanting Studrawa, to critique him. This is when the team had sent the players home, like, go home, spend time with your family. And of course, being a Jersey guy, like, wants to spend time with his family. So he stayed in Columbus and was working. And we see, and we could just sit here and say, yeah, the top 5 is settled. And then DeJuan Jones is number 6. But Luke Wypler sees as there's 2 jobs open, and he's fighting for that. And he's getting a ton of reps this spring with Harry Miller out. He's going back and forth between guard and center, and he's putting his mark in there as well. And then, as you mentioned, Josh Fryer. So it's like they aren't giving in at all that they're not going to be part of this top 5. And that's how you get a top 8, a top 9. And I think they'll have that for sure.
Yeah. And you add in, like, hey, I mentioned Max Ray earlier. Max Ray stepped in at tackle last year and was completely fine. Like, there was no problem at all. So you probably put him on that level where they're probably reasonably comfortable with him playing. Now you're into like top 8, top 9. And, you've got the younger guys who are now, the guys who are entering their 3rd year, guys who are entering their 2nd year. A lot of times you'll have one of those guys take a step. We've heard about Jacob James working at center, for example. Like, sometimes you have someone who takes that next step there. There are so many options. It's crazy how many options they have. They have Enoch Vermahi was playing a bunch of reps 2 years ago. I mean, and so now you're at 10, and yeah, there's just so many options there. And we haven't mentioned, I mean, Ray is a tackle. You've got other guys who could play tackle that we've talked about, but you also do have the luxury of putting literally the number 1 tackle prospect in the entire nation from last year's class, kicking him out from guard to tackle, and then sliding one of those other guys inside a guard. I mean, that's that versatility we've been talking about. And, if you have so many options, this is like the polar opposite of the kind of like late Jim Tressel, Jim Bowman offensive lines, where it's, the left tackle is also the backup at all 4 other starting spots. It's like, well, that's actually not really good because you do need someone to play left tackle too. So they have, you could probably, I just said that the 2nd team is probably at least an above average Big Ten line. I think the 3rd Ohio State offensive line could probably be, at least like better than 3 or 4 lines they're going to play this year at least. And that's the 3rd string. So, and that's without shuffling guys. If you just went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6 through 10, and then 11 through 15, the depth is unbelievable. And, you can go through and look at the recruiting battles they didn't win and, kind of point to that as like, hey, this is an issue. But man, the guys they've brought in, they've done a really good job developing. And, that's having a good offensive line goes an awful long way towards having a good season.
And there's a bunch of people saying, well, why not DeJuan Jones at guard? And for me, I like him staying outside because you need somebody who is only practicing at tackle, that if you need him to come in an emergency, then he can do that, because if he's battling at guard, he's not getting enough reps at tackle. And I don't know that Paris Johnson is that third tackle. He may be, but I'd also like to have a guy who, like another Max Ray, like just keep DeJuan Jones at tackle, because you need that emergency usage. And I also think that he's going to play plenty this year. I mean, he could be the sixth offensive lineman, like the extra tackle in some sort of power sets and things like that, where you find ways to get him out there. He's a big guy, so you use him. And so I want to keep him at tackle, have him continue to get better. He's a little dinged up right now, but he will be back before the end of spring. So I think for me, when people ask, why wouldn't you put him in there? That's why I wouldn't. I just want to keep him outside and let him get as good at that and specialize at that for me, because then, like I said, he's probably your right tackle next year, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think, if you're assuming that Munford obviously is turning pro because he's out of eligibility, and Petit Frere, I think, unless he really desperately wants to come back and get a year at left tackle, I think there's a pretty good chance that Nick Petit Frere turns pro after this year too. Then you have Paris Johnson and DeJuan Jones, and it's just like, okay, well, now there's two more third-year players, and I guess DeJuan Jones will be a fourth-year player next year. But yeah, you just have two more guys, just plug them in, and there you go, and you're off. And yeah, it's a luxury that teams just don't have. I mean, you look at Michigan last year. Michigan last year lost both of their tackles, and it just immediately just completely torpedoed their season. And it feels like for Ohio State, like, well, it would be bad to lose both tackles, but if they did, like, well, there's options there, and they'll figure it out, and it'll be fine. So yeah, it is crazy to me how much that level, that unit has come back from just, I mean, really being a mess a couple of years ago to now. I mean, it just, in your head, think about the 2023 Ohio State team having this incredibly deep, talented cornerback room. And there's so many options there. And it's just like, well, which of these, future first round NFL picks at corner is going to be, the next one who's starting for Ohio State. There's so many options to choose from. You look at it now and it's like, they don't seem like they have quite enough guys there, to field a defense half the time. So that's basically where the offensive line was 2-3 years ago. Now, all of a sudden they're to this spot. So yeah, that coaching staff, they do deserve a lot of credit for kind of getting that together and developing this talent the way they have.
Dud, I mean, what more can you say? He's a great recruiter who gets the job done, develops guys, and is beloved by the fans. And so that's all you can ask for out of your coaches. Anything else, Tom, that you want to touch on before we get out of here?
Well, you had a bullet point about Thayer Munford as the top tackle in the draft. So you want to talk about Thayer Munford as the top tackle in the draft?
Well, that's one of the reasons he came back. He talked about obviously wanting his degree, but also knowing that he can become more than what he is viewed as now. And from some of the NFL scouts I've talked to, they still see him as a guard. And this is an opportunity for him to show everybody, no, I am a tackle. This would be 2 good years, 2 healthy years past his back surgery, like 3 years past his back surgery, but 2 years of being able to lift and be healthy, away from it, to show that I can play tackle. And he was fantastic last year. He will, I assume, be fantastic again this year. Has earned raves from Greg Studrawa about how far he has come, and just, from last year, but even starting in 2019, not being able to lift following his back surgery and just not being able to get in the condition you want, but still played well. And then last year, everybody saw he was, one of the best tackles in the nation, even though nobody really talks about it. And then you'd expect more of that this year. And so I'm completely sold on him. And I like I said a couple weeks ago, him and Nick Petit Frere are the best tandem since Pace and Corey Stringer. And I'll stand by that, because I think that's how well they're going to play. And I have no questions or concern about those two. They are just so calm, like on the field, off the field, like they know what they're doing. It's impressive.
Yeah. And I think they're 2 of the more underrated players on the Ohio State team, which, I mean, it's crazy to say a 4-year starter is an underrated player, but you go through the stats and the number of pressures allowed from the tackle spots, and it's just like between the two of them, did they give up 5 all of last year? I mean, I haven't looked at the stats in a while, but it was just like, the fewest pressures allowed for tackles. And it was like Ohio State's 2 tackles were both among like the top 5 in the nation of any tackles. Like, I mean, that's insane. And then you have them back this year for another year where they have a full spring. They have another year of development, another year of another year with Coach Mick, all of that stuff. You could potentially be better than that this year. I mean, it is an unbelievable luxury, and it is another, there are a whole lot of reasons to think this could be a pretty good Ohio State team, but just the trenches on both sides, I think, has to be right at the top of that list.
And that's another reason why I don't have huge concerns about what the quarterbacks are going to do, because they have this offensive line. They have enough talented running backs to build a running game, and the receivers are there. And yeah, there may be issues defensively, but I think Ohio State will be able to outscore as many people they won. Yes, it starts up front. And when you've got those guys, that depth, we haven't even talked about Donovan Jackson, the 5-star kid who's coming in the summer, who's just going to make things even deeper. But really, really impressive group who, you mentioned, you don't even want to speak it out there, put it out there, but if they did lose their top 2 tackles, then they would just put in the 2 guys who they're probably going to start next year. They've got 3 centers that can play, and that's not even getting to the 4th center of Jacob James. And there's just 8 guys that can play on the interior, probably. I'm just throwing a number out there, but I feel pretty confident that there's just a bunch of guys who can play. And even Thayer Munford and Nick Petit-Frere being willing to play guard if needed. And when there was talk about should Paris Johnson play outside or inside, like they were willing to do whatever, which I think also speaks to the brotherhood of that room and the team as well.
Yeah. And when you have guys who are talented, who are really bought in, who are, have a coaching staff that's developing them, and, guys who are willing to kind of put the team in front of the individual, that's when you have a really, really, really special unit. And that's what they're trying to develop all over the field. I mean, we think that's something we hear more in terms of like the wide receiver unit. You always hear about that, the wide receiver unit being that way. Defensive line, has same as the wide receivers. They've accepted that rotation. The cornerbacks, over the years have been okay with a rotation where you've got a 3-corner rotation, which you're giving up playing time, but there is a greater good thing going on there too. They always talk about being 9 units strong. If you can build that culture in all 9 of your units on the team, that's when you have the season that everyone writes books about. I think that was a lot of like the 2002 team where it's like, how did they overcome, how did they outperform, what they seem to be, the whole is the greater than the sum of the parts. You have that attitude in a lot of your rooms, and good things happen.
Absolutely. I think that'll do it then for us, Tom. If you unless you have any objections.
I have no objections whatsoever. I still object to your bracket, but I have no other objections.
Hey, I think it produced a winner, which is what every bracket is designed to do, regardless of how well it was actually designed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, anytime you can give the 6th seed a triple bye, that's how every tournament should be run. I've said that for years.
Well, thank you that I did it properly. So I appreciate that. But I did admittedly, I kind of threw it together on the fly. And then as I'm getting through the spreadsheet, I'm like, I've never done this before. And this doesn't work out 13 teams.
You've never done a 13-team bracket, or you've never done show prep before? Which one?
Both. What is the spreadsheet? Is this, how do you, and so, it was the first time for everything, but I think it worked. Right?
Yeah, we got to an answer that I was okay with. So I think in that way, I think we're okay.
You selected Denzel Burke to be the next freshman to lose his black stripe. So I think it would only be fair if I also made a selection.
Okay.
But I'd have to go through the bracket.
No. Just off the top of your head, who would you pick as the next one? Because I mean, I think there are absolutely 3 or 4 other extremely viable, defensible options for that next person.
I'm like, I could see it being Kyle McCord, but it's hard to do that when you're a quarterback who can't be touched. Like you can't. The way you plowed over Tyleik Williams at the goal line on that, and it doesn't happen. So it's hard to be that guy. I like the Denzel Burke thing, but I'm gonna go with Travion Henderson. Seems like such a cop out, you know.
Because I put it on a tee for you. Yes.
So I'm going to go with the guy that you just really do not like. You did not care for, Emeka Egbuka. No, I'm going to go with Henderson. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to go with Henderson. But, with this is very tough, Tom. I would like to go with Marvin Harrison. You know what I should do? If Ben Chrisman wins this thing, then I'm going to be laughing last at you.
That's true. Yeah, I do like your Marvin Harrison pick. That has a very good chance of being right 4 days ago. So that's good. Stick with that one.
You know what? I'm going to get value on this bet. I'm going to say Reed Carrico because there's not a lot of linebackers. There's 5 scholarship linebackers right now, I believe, who are healthy, like true inside type linebackers. So I'll go Reed Carrico only to find out in like a day that he hasn't been practicing for 2 weeks. But whatever. Nobody's keeping track.
I like your strategy here, which is to throw out the names of 17 guys. Yes. So you can say, well, I picked him, but I also mentioned him. It's like, well, yes, you mentioned literally everyone. Well,
Tom, you mentioned everybody in this entire bracket. So where do you get off?
That's your fault.
All right, let's end this show. I've had enough. I want to thank everybody. We both want to thank everybody for listening to the show. As always, thank you for watching. This will be the last show of the week. So if you want to listen to us on the weekend, you'll have to listen to the previous shows. So that's going to be on you guys. I want to thank you all for listening. Check out BuckeyeScoop.com. I promise you that you'll enjoy it. There's a bunch of free content. There's paid content, which is just tremendous. So check it out. YouTube.com/BuckeyeScoop as well. There's all kinds of video there, interviews, highlights, what have you. Check it out and enjoy it. And we will talk to you guys next week. Have a good one.